You do not need to be worried about the number of the beast. You don't need to be scared of the beast or even the antichrist for that matter. I'm going to explain to you what that number 666, what it really means. I'm going to break it down for you. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about end time prophecies in general quickly. We need to be careful not to read into Revelation what we want it to mean. We need to make sure that we let the text speak for itself. I almost want to say, you can believe whatever you want. It's not like you're going to get to heaven and then God's going to tell you, stop, you misunderstood Revelation, you need to get out of here. That's not going to happen, right? But here's the thing. End time prophecies causes real harm. Now, before I get to that, I quickly want to give you two examples of how we sometimes read into the text what we want it to mean. The one example will be people will look at Revelation 13 where it talks about the beast that has two horns. Now, the Pope, he's got a hat with 2 pointy ends. It must be the Pope, right? Or another example will be Revelation 9 that talks about the locusts. And people will say that is describing modern day attack helicopters in detail. So it talks about it has a face like a human. That must be the pilot. It's got an iron breastplate. Yes, attack helicopter is made of iron. It's got a scorpion tail. Yes, that's an attack helicopter. It's got wings that makes the sound of 1,000 chariots. That must be a modern day attack helicopter, right? Here's the thing. If you read it in context, if you read Revelation 9, it talks about the locusts that will come, and in its scorpion tail, it has poison that will torture people for 5 months. It will not do any other harm. It will not cause any other damage. Only to people that don't believe. They will be tortured for 5 months to the point where they want to die. They can't die. They want to die, but God will not allow them to die. That poison that the locusts will shoot out, that will not cause them to die. Now, is that a modern day attack helicopter? Do they shoot bullets that will put you in agonizing pain for 5 months, but you won't die? No, it's not. You see, people will pick and choose what they want, and they will read into the text what they want it to say, instead of letting the text speak for itself. Now, we need to make sure that we don't take Revelation and end time prophecies and just pick and choose the one that we like. I had my own interpretation, not my own, it's quite a popular interpretation of Revelation that I believed quite some time ago. And I was convinced of it because there's so many verses in Revelation that lines up with the idea that I had back then. But here's the thing, we need to make sure that we don't choose the one that we like. Back then when I was studying Revelation was one of my favorite books in the Bible. And when I was studying it, I sometimes came across this interpretation that some biblical scholars had, that Revelation was meant for people living 2,000 years ago. It was about the situation that they were living in back then. It has nothing to do with today. Now, I never really went into that. I never really looked into that because I didn't like that idea. I mean, the idea that Revelation is only for people, written for people that lived 2,000 years ago. Why would God add that book to the Bible then? He didn't. I don't believe that. But I'll get to that in a moment as well. The thing is, we need to be careful not to choose the interpretation that we like the most. We need to try and see what the text says, what the author meant. Because if we just choose one that we believe, it will cause harm. Bart Ehrman, in his book Armageddon, he goes into detail and he lists examples of how end-time prophecies caused real harm. One of the examples he lists is the Waco strategy, where David Koresh and his followers killed government agents that were just doing their job. And they justified what they did through revelation. They believed Revelation told them to do this. So end time prophecies causes real harm. Ehrman, in his book, he also talks about how it even influences United States policy. You see, if you have politicians and voters that believe that the end will come any day, that the rapture will come any day, then those people will not be too concerned about preserving our planet for future generations. Global warming will not be an issue, because why care about what's going to happen in 100 years if we're not going to be, anybody's going to be around then, if Jesus will come before then. So end time prophecies do make a difference. It matters. It's just in 2023, there were a couple of Kenyans. Over 400 of them died, and many more are missing and presumed dead. It's a group of Christians that were convinced that a new Kenyan government digital ID that was being issued was the mark of the beast. So they started to fast to the point of death. They also forced others within their group to fast to the point of death, because they didn't want to be part of this new mark of the beast. These end time prophecies cause us real harm. We need to take an honest look and see what the text really means, what the author meant. Now, if you really read Revelation, then something will start to become very clear. If you don't just pick and choose verses, if you read the book Revelation. If we compare Jesus in the Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke especially, if we compare that Jesus to the one we find in Revelation, you will see how completely different it is. In the Gospels, we read about a Jesus that tells us that we should love even our enemies. We should pray for those who persecute us. We should love those who are different to us, with different cultures, ethnic groups, different religion to us. Think of the parable of the Good Samaritan. That person had a different religion, a different ethnic background. Jesus tells us we should love those who are different to us. Compare that to Revelation, right? Those locusts that will torture people for 5 months, it's just people that didn't believe what the followers of Jesus believed. But now in Revelation, they are tortured to the point where they want to die, but they can't. God will not allow them to die because they need to suffer intensely for 5 months. We read so many different contradictions where we see in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus declares all food clean. He says that anything you eat can't make you unclean. But then in Revelation, we read about this woman that she ate food that were offered to idols. Now, not only will she be killed, but also her children. Is that the same God? Is that the same Jesus? The more you read Revelation, the more you will see Revelation is all about wars and plagues and suffering and disasters. And it's not just things that happen. These things come from heaven. They come from God. In Revelation, God is a God of hate and vengeance. But that's not what Jesus told us about. Jesus told us about a God that loves and forgives. Revelation is just so different to what we read, or the God in Revelation is so different to the God that Jesus tells us about in the Gospels. You see, Revelation was written during a time when the Christians were living under Roman imperial rule. The Romans had all the power and all the wealth. And the author of Revelation wanted this reversed. He dreamt of a time when they will have all the power and all the wealth. He even talks about those who live in luxury, they should be tortured. So he had this envy and hate towards the Romans. Now, they did live in a terrible time. So it's understandable that they wanted to see roles reversed. But even then, to see the wealth of the Romans, that they should have the wealth and the power. Just think of how different that is to what Jesus taught us. Now, Jesus in the Gospels, wealth, money was never important. It was the fact that we should rule over others. Jesus explicitly says we should not do that. He said, don't choose leaders. But in Revelation, we live in a city of gold. We have all the wealth. In Revelation, we rule over the other nations. Can you see how completely different that is? I do not believe that Revelation was inspired by God. I believe it was written by someone living in a terrible time and just wanted the roles reversed. I believe that. Now, I've done another video where I talk about not everything in the Bible is the Word of God. You can have a look at that video if you want. But in that video, I also talk about how the books in the Bible were chosen. Now, Revelation was one of the books that went on, that they debated the longest about. It went on to the 5th century, where there were stronger debates about whether Revelation should be included in the Bible or not. And there were a lot of Christians that believed Revelation was heretical. It was not inspired by God. And I also believe that it wasn't. It's not. The Jesus and the God that's explained in Revelation is too different to what we find in the Gospels. All these things, the antichrist, the beast, it's not things that Jesus taught, not the historical Jesus. And that's when we get now to the number of the beast. You see, they were living in this terrible time, and just before that, Caesar Nero tortured Christians because he believed they were responsible for burning the city. So Christians were tortured to death in the arenas through Caesar Nero. Now, the author of Revelation was writing to an audience, and he needed to keep some of it a bit difficult to understand because, talking or writing anything against the Caesar in that time would have meant the death penalty. So he was writing in a bit of code. But the audience that he was talking to, Jewish Christians, they would have known exactly what he was talking about. You see, because in the ancient world, letters were also numbers. It's not like today where we have our alphabet and we have a separate numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back then, they only had the alphabet. So the alphabet were also numbers. So you can take a word, and that word will have a numeric value if you just add up all the letters within the word. For us, it would be strange to take a word and then say, okay, A is 1, B is 2, and then add them up and get to a value. We don't do that. But in ancient times, that were planned. That's what they did. So when the author of Revelation was talking about the number of the beast, and he said this can be calculated, that's literally what he meant. He said 666. Just think about this. And Caesar Nero, that adds up to 666 if you look at the Hebrew values of the letters. Now remember, Revelation was written in Greek, but it was written for a Jewish audience that would have known Hebrew. So they knew that 666, that must be Caesar Nero. It's not like today where we think, okay, what can it be? And you need to start reading up about different possible candidates for this number. And maybe if you read quite a lot, you will read about Caesar Nero because, you might even not know about him. Back then, he was very well known. He was this evil person. Same like Hitler would be during that period of the Second World War. So everybody knew about Caesar Nero. So when the author of Revelation was talking about 666, it wouldn't have taken them long to see, okay, but that name adds up to 666. Now, we can confirm that because some of the ancient manuscripts that we have doesn't say the number of the beast is 666. Some of the Greek manuscripts for Revelation says it's 616. Now, if you take the word Caesar Nero, the way that you write it in Greek, they sometimes add the letter N to the end, Neron. The name doesn't change, it's just for grammar purposes. Now, if you take Caesar Neron, it is 666. If you take the N away, so that it's just Nero, it's still the same name. Remember, it's just a grammar change. If you take that N away, then the N has the value of 50. So take 50 away, that's 616 instead of 666. So that discrepancy actually confirms that the author was talking about Caesar Nero as the number of the beast. I can give you another example to show you that the author of Revelation was writing for the people of his time. In Revelation 17 verse 9 we read, "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated." Now again, the same with Nero. For the audience that the author of Revelation was writing to, they would have known exactly what this meant. Because in the ancient world, there were just one city that was known as a city on 7 hills, and that is Rome, where the Roman Empire was. So Revelation was written for the people of that time that were going through this terrible time where the Romans had all the wealth and the power. It's not meant for us today. It does not give us any prophecies of what is about to happen. It's not talking about anything that's going on today. Now, I know that's not a popular idea. For me, like I told you, Revelation, it was one of my favorite books in the Bible, and I was so excited about what's going to happen. It was so difficult for me to let that go. But if you want to follow Jesus, the real Jesus, then we need to look for the historical Jesus, what he really taught. And when you go to the Gospels and you read of who Jesus was and what he taught, then you will see it's so drastically different to what we see in Revelation. And you need to choose not what's exciting and glamorous. We need to choose to follow the real Jesus. And that's what I did. I choose to follow Jesus. Now, I will also talk to you about, I'll do another video where I'm going to talk to you about the prophecies in Daniel. And you'll see it's also not what you've been taught. I also already did a couple of videos where I looked at what Jesus' idea of the end times was, or not the end times, but Jesus had a very clear apocalyptic view, but it was existential. It was about difficult times are coming. We need to be prepared for that. But Jesus didn't think that the end of the world will happen any day like Paul did. I did a video on that where I showed you that Jesus preached that the kingdom of God was already here. It was spread out upon the earth and people just didn't see it. He didn't think it was this kingdom that's going to come down any day that we need to prepare for. I did videos where I looked at the thief in the night and the owner of the house coming back, and I showed you that that's not really what people think it's about. In this video, I just wanted to explain to you that end time prophecies causes real harm. It's time that we end the end time prophecies, and it's time that we look for what Jesus really taught. Thank you for watching.